What is up, Tiger fans? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I am going to be creating the ideal Clemson football out-of-conference schedule. So this is going to be a 10-year thing. So from all the years 2022 to 2031, I'm just going to be sort of laying out a Clemson football out-of-conference schedule. So none of these years are going to have schedules that look like this, but this is just sort of what I want to see as a fan. This is just sort of a fun video, just sort of doing this for fun. But we're going to get right into this thing with 2022. So in 2022, we have the big game for the 2022 year is scheduled against Notre Dame. But in this video, I have the Tigers playing Coastal Carolina in Charlotte. I've got USF, Furman, and South Carolina all coming to town. So the reason that I have the Tigers playing Coastal Carolina is because I didn't think that this would be a good home-and-home series. I didn't want to make this a home-and-home series. But also I didn't have a road game for the Tigers in this out-of-conference schedule. So by putting this in Charlotte, it's an even neutral site. Coastal Carolina, they're in the Conway area, and then of course Clemson is in Clemson. So it's a pretty neutral site game between these two South Carolina teams going up North Carolina, and it gives me the ability to call it a home game for Coastal Carolina and give Clemson that road game because we have the rotation against South Carolina, and 2022 is going to be a home year against the Gamecocks. The next team is USF. USF head coach Jeff Scott. In 2022, he'll be entering his third year as the South Florida head coach. So obviously you have the reunion there coming back to Death Valley. You have Jeff Scott. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that game. I wanted to get a USF game in here. Furman, we almost always play in-state FCS schools. That's all Furman is here. It's just a placeholder, just a sort of a cupcake team because we always have one of those. And then, of course, the yearly rivalry against South Carolina. So that, of course, is not going to be changing. And the Gamecocks, they are coming to Death Valley in 2022. So next up, we have 2023. So 2023 is going to be a big year for the Clemson program because DJ Uiagalelei, he'll be gone. And we'll be likely handing the team to Cade Klubnik. So it's going to be a big transition for the Clemson Tigers. And the ideal schedule that I want to see in 2023. So I'm not really taking the Clemson team into account. I'm not trying to necessarily give us a schedule that I think we can win. But the out-of-conference teams that I think we should play in 2023 are the Georgia State Panthers. So I've got us playing them, and then Wofford, that's your FCS school. And then I have us playing against Notre Dame. So that's sort of the big game of the schedule. And then at South Carolina. So the first game is Georgia State. They're a group of 5 schools. They're not some like big time school. But they're a solid school to have on the schedule. No real reasoning for scheduling Georgia State other than, they're a team that's relatively close to Clemson that can come into the Valley and be a pretty easy matchup for the Tigers. Wofford, that's that in-state FCS school. You're going to see Wofford probably a couple times in this video. Notre Dame, the next team up. So we played at Notre Dame in 2020. So I figured that the next Notre Dame game should probably be a home game for the Tigers. And I have us playing the Irish here in 2023. I think that'd be a big-time matchup with Notre Dame coming to Death Valley. And that game would be a little bit later in the season. And then at South Carolina, so we are scheduled to go to South Carolina in 2023, of course, as part of the rivalry rotation. Next up, 2024. So 2024, this will be Cade Klubnik's second year. And the Clemson program, it should be a very good one still. So we're definitely not going to be afraid to schedule. So the teams that I want to see us play in 2024, maybe a little bit of a weak schedule. The first team is West Virginia. And the reason I scheduled West Virginia is because it's a Power 5 school, but I didn't really find any schools that I really wanted to put on this schedule. So I went with a team like West Virginia that's sort of an average Power 5 school, but it's a respectable team. I didn't really want to have another neutral site game. So this can be just scheduling West Virginia so it's not a huge school, even though we have scheduled big-time schools pretty much every year for the next 15 or so years. I have a scheduling West Virginia here. Next team is Marshall. That's that group of 5 school that's solid. They can come into Clemson relatively close and just provide a fairly easy game, but not a super easy game like the next team, which is the Citadel. So that's that FCS in-state rival. And then South Carolina. South Carolina will come to Clemson in 2024. Now, 2025, this is where it gets really interesting. I think you guys are going to love what I have on the 2025 schedule. So we're going to get right into this. So in 2025, we've got the Tigers opening with Middle Tennessee. So that's that FCS school. Once again, fairly close to Clemson. They'll provide some solid competition, but that's really just a warm-up for the next game, which is Ohio State. So I have the Tigers playing Ohio State in Death Valley. So that should be a bunch of fun. Ohio State, they're a team that we have a big rivalry with. Even though we've only played them 5 times in our history, we have a big rivalry with them. So I think a home-and-home series would make a lot of sense between Ohio State and Clemson, who in 2025 should still be 2 of the top programs in the country. Wofford, that's your in-state FCS school. And then at South Carolina, we're scheduled to go to South Carolina in 2025. So a pretty solid schedule there. You got 2 Power 5 schools. And then of course the FCS school and the Group of 5 school in 2026. So 2026 is another pretty solid schedule. So we play Troy in week 1, and once again that's just a Group of 5 warm up for the end of the home and home series with Ohio State. So I kind of talked about this in the 2025 year. Ohio State, they're one of the top programs. Clemson's one of the top programs. These programs, they don't necessarily like each other. It's a very heated rivalry every single time that these teams play. So I think a home-and-home series makes a lot of sense for both schools. And I have it beginning in Clemson, ending in Columbus, Ohio. And South Carolina State, that's your in-school that in-state FCS, and then South Carolina coming to Clemson in 2026. In 2027, so now that the Ohio State series is over, now we move on to Notre Dame as sort of the big school on our schedule. Temple, so they're the team that sort of starts off. Notre Dame maybe is a team that you expect to see a little bit later in the schedule, but I have us playing Notre Dame. This would probably be like a week 2 or week 3 game. Maybe we play an ACC opponent week 1, then Temple, then Notre Dame. Or play Temple, ACC, and then Notre Dame. But I think Notre Dame probably is a week 2 or a week 3 slot here, and then Temple week 1 or week 2. And then I've got Citadel, so that's the in-state school. And then at South Carolina, we go to South Carolina in 2027. So we have a new big-time team here in Notre Dame. We last saw them in 2023 before the Ohio State series and right before the West Virginia game. So now in 2028. So we have that home game against Notre Dame, and now we see another big-time school that we haven't actually seen yet in this video. So we start with App State. So that's a Group of 5 school that we've played a fairly decent amount. They're pretty close to home for us, so they can come into Clemson and sort of help us tune up for the next team, which is Georgia. So we're playing Georgia in a neutral site this year, like in real life. We're playing Georgia in Charlotte in 2021, and I have not put them yet on the schedule here in this video. So I think it made sense to go to Georgia here in 2028. Then we play Wofford, which is the in-state school right before South Carolina at the end of the year. In 2029, so we only have 3 years left. So we just played at Georgia, and now in 2029, I have us playing a neutral site game against Oregon. This one is going to be considered a home game for Oregon, and I have it in Arlington, so I think this makes a lot of sense. Oregon, of course, coming from the Northwest, and then Clemson coming from the Southeast. I think Arlington is a decent meetup spot for these two schools, and it should be a big game too. Pretty big-time programs, and then you have Georgia Southern. That's just sort of a middle-of-the-pack school. We played Georgia Southern a couple times recently. So I've got them on the schedule, and then Furman, that's your in-state rival, to help us tune up for the South Carolina game. And we will be going to Columbia in 2029. In 2030, I have the Tigers facing off against Boise State, Notre Dame, South Carolina State, and South Carolina. So Boise State, they're actually a really big program coming from the Mountain West, a little bit of a smaller conference, but a big program for Boise State. So I think this would actually be a pretty big Week 1 game. I considered making this a neutral site game, but because of the next game, which is in Notre Dame, I decided that it'd be better just to have Boise State come to Clemson. They could be a big-time Week 1 opponent, potentially draw some fans, and get the Tigers ready to face off against Notre Dame, because chances are Notre Dame is still going to be a really good team in 2030. Then we have South Carolina State and South Carolina each at home for the Tigers. So now 2031, the final year of this video. So once again, this is just sort of me creating the ideal schedule. So this is not what's going to happen or anything close to what is going to happen. But this is just sort of what I want to see as a fan. Of course, the title of this video is creating the ideal Clemson football schedule. So in 2031, I have the Tigers. This one, I had a little bit of fun here. So we've got Georgia coming to town. So I had us going to Georgia a couple years ago. So I have Georgia coming into Clemson and coming into the Valley. So maybe that's a week 1 or week 2 game. And that would be a big time game. And then I have us playing at Hawaii. So it's probably not super realistic that the Tigers would travel to Hawaii, but it's Hawaii. So I think you kind of understand why I have us going to Hawaii. And it was kind of nice to have 2 road games on the schedule. And then I've got us playing Troy again. So maybe this is the game right before South Carolina, but I also, as you probably noticed, I avoided the in-state FCS school. So you've seen that a lot before the South Carolina game, but I'm replacing that with Troy. So I'm giving us 2 Group of 5 schools and 2 SEC schools, including Georgia, which is one of the top programs in the country. So I thought that this was one of our stronger overall schedules. And going to Hawaii, that's just sort of, that would be kind of a fun trip to make for the Clemson team, even though it is not realistic in any way. But that's pretty much all I have for this video, so be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments what team you want Clemson to schedule a home-and-home series with. We have future home-and-home series scheduled with Oklahoma and LSU, and we have plenty of games scheduled with Georgia and Notre Dame. So outside of those 4, who do you want to see Clemson schedule a home-and-home series with? Personally, for me, it's Ohio State. You saw them in here in this video. I think Ohio State would be a really fun team to play in a home-and-home series for the Tigers, and they're not afraid to schedule. They've scheduled Alabama. They played Oklahoma a couple years ago, so I think that would make sense for both schools, but you'll have to let me know in the comments what you would like to see. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and go subscribe to my live streaming channel and my main channel if you are not already subscribed to either of those. They will each be linked in the description, as they always are, and I'll see you guys next time. Go Tigers.